Hello, dwellers and travelers. My name is Ace Blackhand, your narrator, and welcome to Stories from the Wasteland, the series where we talk about everything Fallout, from lore to events in the series. On today's episode, we're discussing the poster child of the series, the Brotherhood of Steel. However, instead of going deep into each chapter, I'm going to take you back to where it all began. The year is 2076. West Tech's Nuclear Biological Chemical Division, or NBC, had just made a major breakthrough in what was to become the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV. On January 7th, 2077, the United States government authorized a complete relocation of the project to the newly finished Mariposa military base in response to fear of espionage. The project was to continue human testing. Along with scientists, a security team was also transferred to provide protection for the many researchers working there. The team was headed by Colonel Robert Spindle and Captain Roger Maxson. Months went by without suspicion. The security team worked their shifts and left the scientists to their own devices. However, on October 10th, 2077, the truth was revealed. Soldiers discovered the Mariposa scientists were performing experiments using FEV on military prisoners. The soldiers wanted blood and answers. Colonel Spindle, facing a situation he had never encountered, had a nervous breakdown, locking himself within his office. Captain Roger Maxson took over. Everything was already at risk of becoming a full-scale rebellion within the base, and on October 12th, Maxson prevented one of his soldiers from killing a scientist. His goal was to keep order, and he ordered interrogation of the science team and took authority as acting commander, hoping to prevent a full mutiny. The next day, the tribunals began. Chief Researcher Robert Anderson was the first researcher brought before Maxson. The researcher explained that the Mariposa research facility was fully sanctioned by the government. He proceeded to outline the steps that he had taken since the major breakthrough within the FEV virus. Maxson did not believe him. Anderson grew agitated, screaming at Maxson, declaring he was just following orders, and that just like Maxson, he was a military man doing what needed to be done. Maxson shot and killed him. Maxson himself could no longer believe that he was trying to prevent a full mutiny, but he still tried to rationalize it within his mind. The execution of Anderson sparked the creation of the rebellion in the Mariposa military base, with Maxson at its head. And 2 days later, on October 15th, Maxson tried to speak with Colonel Spindle. The response was that of a madman. Maxson and his soldiers simultaneously broke down the door. They found Spindle facing them. His final words were, "I'm sorry," before he executed himself. The interrogations continued, each resulting in execution. However, on October 18th, Maxson was finally convinced by Aaron Shellman. Maxson reasoned that each story was too specific to be fake, and though she convinced him, she too was executed. On October 20th, 2077, a radio frequency blared somewhere in the US headquarters. The voice of Roger Maxson declared over the radio that he and his men are to secede from the US and that Mariposa was under his authority. No response came from the United States headquarters. 1 day later, Maxson brought the families of all the soldiers into the base to take shelter. 3 days later, on October 23rd, 2077, the Great War began. Mariposa was spared of the nuclear devastation, and the facility kept the families and soldiers safe from the fallout. The base had lost all contact with the world, and Maxson feared that bombs would rain again soon, and China would devastate the base, not knowing that everyone had already lost. Plans were made to leave. And 2 days later, on October 25th, Sergeant Plattner reported there was no significant radiation readings around the base. Roger Maxson announced that Exodus would be undertaken, and on October 27th, the former soldiers and families left Mariposa. Their goal was to reach Lost Hills. As November arrived, the soldiers reached Lost Hills. The journey was not without casualties, however. The soldiers were protected by T-51 power armor, and their families were not. Marauders, raiders, and frantic survivors attacked the caravan, mainly the civilians. Many were lost, among them Roger Maxson's wife. However, his son remained alive. This journey was also not without discourse. Sergeant Dennis Allen abandoned the group, heading to the remains of West Tech, hoping to find some sort of answer for why their government had abandoned them. Lost Hills became their home, becoming the last bastion of technology in a world that had been sent back centuries in a single night. Lost Hills was equipped with a satellite connection, and Maxon began sending signals, trying to find anyone left within this dead world. Weeks went by without an answer. One morning, Maxon radioed to an old Ranger base in Appalachia, and was greeted by the sound of static and a voice. Lieutenant Elizabeth Taggarty. She was hesitant to speak with him. His public denouncement of the US and subsequent rebellion had shattered many soldiers' trust within him. But she gambled, and learned the atrocities that the US had done, and people they had experimented on, and the horrors of FEV. She subsequently joined Maxon's banner. With the stars and stripes tarnished forever, Maxon began devising something new. New symbols, ranks, and ideas began to replace those that had been burned away by nuclear fire. Ideas to bring about new life and meaning to those left behind in the Wasteland. It was a new way forward, a new path free of the sins of the past. And on June 20th, 2082, the Brotherhood of Steel took form. The Brotherhood began to grow, indoctrinating a unit of National Guardsmen who had been stationed near the Mariposa into its ranks. They acquired footholds and began sending expeditions into the Mojave, hoping to gather intelligence and recruits for the cause. In Appalachia, the sister organization of the Brotherhood also began to expand. Taggarty at first pushed for those with military background, but eventually under Maxon, began to train survivors and bring purpose to many at the Camp Venture training post. In May 2086, a new directive came from Roger Maxon at Lost Hills. The Brotherhood was to gather, record, and save the collective knowledge of mankind for future generations to one day act as a catalyst for a rebirth of the civilization of mankind. Many were enthusiastic about the directive, others left the Brotherhood behind altogether. By 2090, the Lost Hills chapter and Appalachia chapter were losing communication. The technology was declining, and eventually all contact would cease between the two factions. Maxon ordered Taggarty to continue on and keep fighting. Communications failed soon after their last chat, and the two chapters were separated. The Appalachian Brotherhood chapter would come to a close in August of 2095, where they were wiped out by the Scorched and subsequent Scorched Beast. Now there's a lot more about the Appalachian chapter, Brotherhood of Steel, but we will talk about them another time. In the year 2135, Roger Maxon died of cancer. Post-mortem, he was declared the founder and deliverer of the Brotherhood of Steel. The helm was then passed on to Maxon II, who became High Elder while John Maxon, Roger's grandson, joined the Paladins. The Brotherhood began exercising control of the surrounding land, and formed trade relations with the surrounding settlements, especially the Hub. In 2150, the Brotherhood went to war with the Vipers. The war lasted 5 years and culminated in the death of Maxon II by poison arrow. Immediately, his son John was promoted to the Elder Council, and Paladin Rhombus took his mission to exterminate the Vipers. Within a month, more than 90% of the Vipers lay dead, never regaining their strength. In the year 2159, John Maxon ascended to High Elder, promoting Paladin Rhombus to head Paladin. In the year 2161, while out on patrol, a group of knights discovered the corpse of a super mutant. Head Scribe Vree determined the creature was sterile, and that these creatures were being created. The Elder Council immediately increased security measures and trainings. In addition, they began to send out patrols to the north and east. None returned from the north. Only one came back from the east, reporting an encounter with at least 20 super mutants. Members from the Hub began disappearing, and the Elders no longer knew what to do. This is where you come in Fallout 1. The Vault Dweller rescues an initiate from the bandits in the Hub, and the Brotherhood assigns them with a mission. Find the Brotherhood disc from Sergeant Dennis Allen, and find out what happened to them after the Mariposa Rebellion. No one thought the Dweller would return. Many knights had been sent out before, and none were ever heard from again. Days later, the Dweller returned, the Brotherhood disc in hand. The Dweller became the first outsider to be granted entry into the Brotherhood in 20 years. The Brotherhood then subsequently armed the Dweller, allowing them to seek and destroy the Master within the Boneyard. Once dead, the Brotherhood began to dismantle the Master's army, the Unity. After this, the Brotherhood began what was called peaceful expansion. They instead worked to become a major research and development center to allow for the reintroduction of technology slowly into the Wasteland. Rhombus headed this expansion, and the Brotherhood was brought to the apex of its power, having good relationships with the infant New California Republic. However, as years passed, the Brotherhood grew stagnant. They grew confident that no one else had the access to the technology they did, and in 2240, they learned of the Enclave, and began to spy and collect information on them, reactivating outposts in Northern California. However, before they could act and fight the rising Enclave themselves, the Chosen One destroyed most of their forces, leaving the Brotherhood without a true foe to face. The Brotherhood began expanding east under Senior Paladin Owen Lyons, and further west under Elder Elijah. The East Chapter made it to the capital Wasteland in 2255, with them one of John Maxon's descendants, Arthur Maxon. He had been sent due to growing internal conflict between the Lost Hills and Mojave Chapter. The chapter rediscovered Liberty Prime in the former Pentagon and received orders to establish themselves as a permanent chapter and collect technology discovered in the East. However, with the discovery of super mutants, Elder Lyons made a choice. He shifted the Brotherhood to protect the inhabitants of the capital Wasteland. The choice caused Lost Hills to declare them a rogue chapter. In addition to this, many split off, forming the Outcast, still continuing the mission and gathering technology, and in time would travel back west to rejoin their brothers and sisters. There is more of the East Chapter story, but that will have to wait for another time. As the years went on, the NCR powers grew. The new government power had taken the role of technological research from the Brotherhood, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Tensions began to flare. Neither side agreed that the other knew what was best for the handling of technology. War was declared. The Brotherhood had the technological advantage in their armor and weapons, but having forbidden outsiders to join for a long time, their numbers were few. The NCR had thousands of troops at the ready. For every troop the Brotherhood cut down, 5 more took his place. The Western Brotherhood sustained heavy losses, losing 4 bunkers, detonating them, and all the technology within them, so the NCR could not have its secrets. The Brotherhood's tactics grew desperate and terroristic, bombing camps and civilians, and irradiating the government's gold supply to cripple their economy. Elder Elijah's chapter also participated within this war. They suffered heavy casualties at Operation Sunburst, and were driven into hiding within the Hidden Valley bunker system. Despite losing the war and being a fractured power, Lost Hills regained some hope. Unbeknownst to them, Arthur Maxon in 2283 brokered a peace between the Outcast and Eastern Brotherhood of Steel Chapters, and at 16, he became the youngest elder in the chapter's history. When he regained contact with Lost Hills, the chapter gave them their blessing and legitimacy. He became the High Elder. And so, we've come to an end of this video and the Lost Hills chapter. I'd love to hear what you think. Do you believe the Brotherhood will serve a higher purpose? Or that this chapter will eventually crumble into dust as the world before it? I'm Ace Black and your narrator, signing off.